Hello, hello, hello. We are on day 3 of our Christmas romp. So we've had C, we've had H, we're now on to R. Relatable stories. My little song for you today. Strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his song. How do you get over to your ideal audience the pain of where they're at now and the gain of where they want to be? And how are you going to get them there? Thing is, when you know your avatar, do you remember we were talking about the person yesterday? How are you going to describe their painful situation? This is why it's very, very, very important that you know who you're speaking to, the language that you are going to use to describe that stuck place of where they are now. Now, there are a lot of people who don't like going, excuse me, and poking the bear. And that's understandable because nobody wants to be felt. Nobody wants to make you feel worse. However, from a neurological perspective, 70% of our brains are wired to pick up on what is wrong. Danger, danger. What could be wrong? What's different? How am I going to survive? You are going to get the best attention from your audience when you point out what is wrong. When you can explain to your ideal audience and you can say to them, I know kind of where you're at because I've been there too. Because as we were saying yesterday, chances are that your avatar is you a few years ago and that you're using the language of where you were and describing where you were using that language. If you use the language of where you are now, it's not going to make as much sense. I'll give you an example. One of our speakers on Monday was talking about working with parents of teenagers. And one example that he gave was this mother saying, oh, I know what my 15-year-old's going through. I was a 15-year-old once. But his point was, yes, you were, but cast your mind back 25 years when you were 15. It was a very different ballgame then, wasn't it? Life was so different. We didn't have social media pressures. We didn't have everybody comparing to next door because they could see the plastic, the best foot forward way of doing things that social media has introduced. It's a very different environment now. And so the language needs to change. So knowing who you're speaking to and how they're describing that pain. Relatable stories is where we're going with the R. So how is it that your ideal audience member is feeling that stuckness, that pain, where you were before you learnt your wisdom? How are they describing that pain? And are you using those exact words when you're telling your stories? Are your stories relatable in a way that makes sense to your audience? Again, let me give you an example. You're starting them off with where they're at. Do you remember yesterday I was talking about the energy workers and wanting to work in corporates? And if you launch straight in with speaking about energy to the average mining core chap, it's going to go over his head. He's not going to understand. Well, this is where we're going to, again, looking at the language of how your ideal person is explaining about their pain. Do you remember the example I gave of when I was talking about my experience of having the life sucked out of me? That one phrase was enough to resonate with the lady that came up to me afterwards. different experience, different life experience. But that one phrase was what described for her experience. So she applied that to her particular situation. So these relatable stories are very important. Now, you may be in a situation where you're talking to somebody and that particular story does not land. Have you got in your little box of tricks, your little toolbox, in your story box, other examples of things that may be more relatable? Plenty of times I've told this story about the importance of knowing your audience and the language involved. My first example of a networking meeting here in Australia, somebody complimented me on my pants. I got very embarrassed, excused myself, and went to the ladies and checked my flies. Because in the UK, pants are what you wear next to your skin. I just don't know what's going on here, but composed myself, back into the room, and somebody else who had witnessed this and knew I was fresh off the boat, as it were, came up to me and went, you know, she was talking about your trousers, don't you? I went all embarrassed again. Why did I not know that? Now, I knew pants was the American for trousers, but I had not worked out that it was also the Australian for trousers. Or, as I'd been used to in Scotland, breeks or trews. Different words mean different things, and those cultural references are going to be relatable to your audience. So if you are speaking as an international speaker, and many of you either are already or have aspirations to be international speakers, are the stories you're using relatable to your audience in front of you, whether it be virtual or whether it be physically in front of you? Knowing your people, knowing their pain, how are they describing it? The problems that they are facing right now. In order for your message to land, you may need to poke that bear a bit more, magnify the problem, because then you will have their attention. I don't like being here. Now, you can tell me just enough to get me a little bit past the I don't like being here. Or you can give me that wonderful image of the place that I really do want to get to. How are you going to get me there? Describing my problem, describing what I want, acknowledging my challenges in the way. What are those boulders, which at the moment I'm seeing as boulders, and you're going to show me that they can be stepping stones. What is the pain? What is the gain? What are those challenges that you can turn into stepping stones to get to that nirvana, to get to that paradise island? However it is, your ideal person is explaining it. Relatable stories. What's going to land? What's going to make sense to your ideal audience? Yeah, you may not want to poke the bear, but to get the attention, to get that part of the primal brain, and yes, there is a lot of neuroscience behind this, to get to that part of the primal brain that goes, okay, you got my attention, now what? We like to think that we make our decisions with our prefrontal cortex. Newsflash, it's made in the primal brain, and then it gets chunked up to the neocortex for rubber stamping. your message needs to get to that primal brain first. Poke the bear, explain the pain, magnify the pain if necessary, because if I stay where I am, it's uncomfortable. Something we heard this morning on your Words Have Power was, I can be familiar with my uncomfortable rut, but it's going to take something important, some tipping point, to get me out of that uncomfortable comfort zone. So what can you tell me that's going to poke the bear big enough that goes, I've had enough, no more? What were those stepping stones you were telling me about? Because I want to get there. I want to go to my paradise island. Relatable stories, pain and gain. Pillar number 3 of our 9 pillars of influential communication. Now, if you haven't already downloaded it, I believe there was a link in the announcement. We will see you tomorrow for day 4, pillar number 4, which will be the I, inspiration. I wonder what song I'm going to come up with tomorrow. Strumming my pain with his fingers, telling my life with his songs. Have fun. See you tomorrow. Bye from me.